Hey, welcome to United Opposition with Scott and Marshall. Today we're talking about, can speech be violence, and is it okay to punch a Nazi? Let's find out. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to United Opposition, where opposing forces come together and talk without violence. Is that right, Marshall? Because
That's right.
You're not actually in the same room, so I can't actually punch you. But let's see, which side of the screen you're on this side of the screen, so I can.
No, you got to go the other way, at least from my view.
Oh, okay.
But whatever.
There we go.
Boom.
We'll do that. No, I'm sure I got you on that one somewhere.
You know, we have a great picture. I'll have to find it from our first podcast where you have a boxing glove or something, and
yep.
You're threatening me with it.
We went shooting.
Yeah, there you go.
So, well, hey, we're talking about violence, speech, and violence today in United Opposition, and we can just kind of I like just starting off by kind of each stating our position, and then we can have the discussion from there. Before we get into that right now, I just want to say thank you to Covenant Coffee for sponsoring 511 Media Group, and Covenant Coffee it's hope in a cup, and and this is my ASMR. Here we go. Drinking that coffee. That's right. And what it is, it's emancipated foster youth, kids who have aged out of the foster program. This Covenant Coffee gives them a place. They give them a job. They give them work experience. They give them mentorship and a way to be able to step from foster care. And there's so many times when people they hit that, you're in foster care and then suddenly you're not. And that transition from foster care to on your own, it sometimes can be really rough, and Covenant Coffee steps in. When you're buying Covenant Coffee, that's what you're supporting, and that's what they're doing, and it's really awesome. So thank you, Covenant Coffee, for sponsoring 511 Media Group. So we're talking again about speech and violence, and is speech violence? I know that a lot of times people can kind of say that. I'm just going to state my position. Marshall, you state your position, and we'll have a cool discussion. So I don't think that speech is violence. I think it's dangerous if we consider speech can be violence. I think that is dangerous, because then you can have people who believe that, who are going to act physically violent against someone's speech. And I think that's a dangerous line to cross. And if we consider legally, if we start considering speech violence, I think it's very dangerous if we start making laws about that. If there's any kind of laws going on, I'm not a real big fan of hate crime laws. Well, not hate crime laws, but hate speech laws. Hate crime, absolutely, but hate speech laws, because I'm always concerned about any laws being written that effectively are punishing somebody before an actual crime is committed. So there's my position. Marshall?
Mm-hmm. My position is that the experts on language definitely consider language to be a potential avenue for violence. And of course, even in U.S. law, there's the fighting words exception to free speech, where if your language creates a dangerous situation, such as shouting fire in a crowded theater, or if you go up to somebody and you start calling them names or berating them in such a way that it's likely to provoke a violent physical reaction, those forms of speech are not protected. And so I do think that, in accord with linguistics, professors, professionals, experts. Again, I like to go back to Michel Foucault, whose groundbreaking work done, now 80 years ago in France, very clearly indicated that, yes, language can be a form of violence, and it's used to entrench systematic violence in a society. And we have to kind of pay attention to the words we use.
I agree with paying attention to the words we use, and I agree that that there needs to be some kind of curtailing on certain kinds of speech. Again, things that are calling to action by saying, like what's the famous one, crying fire in a crowded theater type of thing. I understand that, but again, me, I like words and I like definitions from the Oxford Dictionary. Violence is behavior, including physical force. Sorry, I had it on here and I don't even have my glasses on now. I can't see it. I think but it's saying involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. But the idea being, it's a description of physical force. And I'm at a position. I'm a person, and I really hope this is true about me. I say it and I believe it. I've never been in a situation where it's tested me in this way, but I believe that there is nothing you or anyone can say to me that will cause me to act physically violent against you. Whether you say something about me, my wife, my kid, there's no excusable speech from anybody else that would justify me getting physically violent with someone. I just don't believe that physical violence is never ever a rational response to something someone says.
What was your source for that definition?
Oxford Dictionary.
Okay, I'm going to share mine now. This here is, I think I'm sharing screen. I don't know. But this here is from Oxford University Press. And it says here, linguistic anthropologists in particular have articulated the discursive nature of structural violence. Speech acts as forms of violence, and language policies and forms of language classification as violent practices.
So you're not reading from a dictionary.
No, I'm reading from subject matter
You're
experts, research.
You're not defining a word.
Right. I'm telling you what I'm summarizing the research from the experts in the field who know more than a person who just scribbles a dictionary definition out. Remember, the dictionary is good for
dictionary. If we can't trust what a dictionary says about a word, then how can we even speak? How can we even have conversation if we're not going to trust the definition that's defined in our dictionaries as a word?
So the dictionary definition you can trust, but remember that's for the everyday person on the street. But there's this whole other realm in which we study. In which we study and do research and learn.
Yeah, but that's my point. The average everyday person views that word and has meaning to that word. When you take a word that everybody understands, when you take a word like violence and everybody understands that it means physical act, a physical act of hurting someone, and then you co-opt that into what you're trying to say, you are hijacking the definition of that word. A real word that everybody just like you said, that the common everyday person believes it means this. You're taking that meaning and you're co-opting it and hijacking it to try to bring more gravitas to your position. You're stealing the definition of that word to try to make your position sound bigger than it really is.
First of all, language evolves. Language evolves. This is why we don't speak Shakespearean English.
Yep.
The meanings of words evolves over time.
But again, as a conservative, I want to try to hold that back as much as possible.
Right. Of course you do.
Because the more we change things, people, if the ground is constantly shifting, then you cannot build a foundation. So I'm always
buckle up because the ground is always going to be shifting.
Right, but I'm
let me tell you about Pangea.
I know that, but again, just like we talked about when I said that, liberty is a currency, we should fight that as a society. I know it's going to happen, but we should make sure it happens as slow as possible so that we can maintain as much of a foundation as we can. I'm not blind in saying that it won't, but it should be fought. It should be resisted to change.
Michel Foucault literally used a similar terminology. He talked about discourse as currency. He used the word currency, and that the purpose of discourse is to get people to do what you want. It's a form of control. If someone is speaking, they're attempting to control in some way. That is how language is used. Now, you mentioned a moment ago that there's nothing that anyone can say to you that would cause you to react violently. And
that's what I would hope. That's what I believe, and that's what I would hope. Even though I've never actually been pushed into that situation, there's a possibility I might cave. I can't claim that, no, that'll never happen, but that's my position and my principle and my belief, and I hope that I could live up to that.
So in every society, in every civilization, you have an in-group, and then you have all the out-groups, the people who are not the in-group. And the in-group very often has that exact same position. There's nothing anyone can say that will shake me because they are confident in the societal and structural systems of language and discourse and economics and everything else that holds them in their position of power. They don't have the same fear that people in the out group have, and they don't understand the people in the out group. That's why, for example, people who are in the out group, let's say, African Americans or Black Americans, whichever term
or Hispanics,
we wish to use. No, Black Americans can use a word that we call the N-word.
Mhm.
and they use it all the time, right? You listen to Black folks speak to each other, they use the N-word quite liberally.
Mhm.
But folks can't use that word. And I believe that is rightfully so, because we are in the in group. We are traditionally in the in group in this society. And that's why you'll hear white people say,
Reverse
well,
that.
if a Black person
They
calls me
call
a
her,
racial name,
yeah,
I am
that,
reversing it for you right now. If a Black person calls me a name, big deal. I don't care. It's just water
no,
off.
but isn't it, is it just
Sticks and
wrong?
stones,
Is
But
it just as wrong?
what's that?
Is it just as wrong?
No, it is not just as wrong,
It's
because
not
you
just as
have
wrong for
because you
someone
have an in group that has the power and the control
so
and has had it
more.
for
Got
5 centuries, and they're punching down. It's always wrong to punch down. You never punch down. If you're going to punch, you punch up or you punch lateral,
How
but
come
you
we
never
don't punch
punch
at all?
down. Because the only way to correct an injustice sometimes is to throw a punch.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to, right? That's why you have guns. That's why people have weapons, because sometimes those things are unfortunately necessary. And it's the same thing with language, So yes, there are going to be certain words or phrases or things, certain constructs or ideas that are going to be somewhat taboo for the in-group, because that is how the in-group has traditionally kept all other groups down, through the use of certain language and the use of certain social structures. If we want a just and equitable and fair society, we have to break down those unjust structures. The problem is structural violence is something that we live in. It's like room temperature to us. To us, it's just normal. What's wrong with the room temperature? It's 72 degrees.
That sounds like an excuse.
No, but this is how
Sounds like an excuse.
This is how it is, Scott. And this is what
That's just an excuse.
it's the people here, the anthropologists on Oxford here are telling is that it's the same thing. If you are accustomed to keeping your house at 75 degrees, and I'm accustomed to keeping my house at 67 degrees, I'm going to go to your house and I'm going to feel very uncomfortable. But you're going to be like, well, it's my house. Okay. I feel great. So why don't you feel great? It's a complete lack of empathy and a lack of awareness. It's a lack of sensitivity to the struggles of others. But
that can be said across. That can be said across anything in any direction. It's not only one direction. You're making it sound like it's only one direction. And only one direction has to.
It's generally specific to each society. Okay, right, each society has its own version of this.
That's the problem I have with that. Is you're making the point, and you're trying to say that only one side it has to adjust. Both sides don't have to adjust. So both sides, if both sides don't adjust and aren't willing to adjust, then you have no solid ground to base to have a communication. If one side is always saying, no, I don't have to adjust, you have to adjust, then you cannot have communication. You cannot have diplomacy. You cannot have conversation. If we're walking into the conversation saying, by the way, you're the side that has to adjust, now let's talk, there is no talk. There is no communication. Both sides have to be willing to say, we will make adjustments. And as long as you're saying that we have to come into this with only one side making adjustments, then there can be no communication. There can be no conversation.
Let's say somebody harms you or steals from you just out of the blue, completely, entirely unjustified. And it comes time to kind of make peace and reconcile. And it would be important then for that person to apologize to you, to acknowledge what they did wrong, and to have genuine remorse. But then would it be just to turn around and say, now you, Scott, have to apologize for this person because you did something that, to protect yourself at the moment, or you called the police and they went to jail or something. Should you apologize to that person? Should you meet that person halfway? I don't think so. If a person wrongs you, especially unnecessarily out of the blue, you are under no obligation.
You are confounding individuals and society. That makes sense for an individual because I personally did nothing wrong to wrong that person when they robbed me. Now trying to apply that to a society.
But it does cross apply.
No, but it does
It's
not.
called structural violence. You just got to look it up, Scott.
No, but it does not. No, I'm saying that whole. I understand that it exists. I think it's wrong.
Well,
I understand that the concept exists. That somebody's making up this concept to make excuses for people's actions. I disagree with that concept. You cannot apply. You cannot use an individual example to apply to a whole group of people. You can't say, well, this person's group was at one point harmed by your person's group, therefore you personally now have to pay this person something. That is wrong. No, it is individual. If I treat you right, if yours and my interaction is just, then yours and my interaction is just. Outside of that makes no difference between yours and my interaction. So for your example of that person robbed me personally, and now I should apologize because I said, no, they robbed me. And you're trying to apply that to a whole group to justify the actions of this group was hurt by this group. Therefore, this group should apologize to that group. That person never did anything. There are individuals who never did anything wrong, and there are individuals who were never hurt. Anytime that we're grossly applying these rules to groups of people, I believe is wrong. Everything should be on an individual basis.
So let's use another analogy here. Let's say I steal something from you, something that means a lot to you, whatever it is. I steal it and I pass it down to my son, who passes it to his son, and so on. 2 or 3 generations later, who does it rightfully belong to? Does it belong to your great-grandson or my great-grandson?
Well, now again, there's a law and precedent for that. That in the end, if it is discovered that this belongs to that person, yeah, I get what you're saying, that on an individual basis, this was individually stolen by this person and passed down, but that property does belong to this person. You can have a receipt. Here's where they purchased it. That there's no statute of limitations as far as like, if it's discovered that car you bought from that person turns out that it was a stolen car from someone else, the car gets returned back to the person it was stolen to. But that's an individual action. That was an individual action that happened. It wasn't a people. These people, this was harm. It's an individual legal action and actual proof of ownership.
Well, now we know what you truly value, your car.
Well, I only said that because I literally just watched. There's a YouTube guy called Steve Leto. He talks about he likes cars, but he's a lawyer, and that was one of the things. Literally, I just watched a video like last week where he was talking about stolen vehicles, and so that's why it was on my mind, and I referenced that because I was referencing literally back to a video I just watched on this.
Nice. Now, let me tell you this: societies are comprised of individuals. Every person who was plucked from Africa and brought over as a slave was an individual.
Yep.
And they lost their entire birthright. They lost everything for somebody else's greed. They're complete victims. And this victimhood transcends from generation to generation to generation. And there are echoes of that victimhood that still persist today. At the same time, there are the beneficiaries of that. And the problem is that we've gone so many generations now since the first slaves and since the outlawing of slavery, even though segregation was well within the lifetime of many people still alive today.
Segregation is what the liberals want right now, which is crazy.
Okay, I don't want to get into that at this moment. Okay, I don't want to go down a bunny trail. But the problem is that we have gone far enough away from this that it's clouded to us, and we don't realize that many of us are beneficiaries of centuries of racism and slavery and evil.
All of us, everybody,
and many of us are still being victimized by it.
All beneficiaries.
And it is possible to simultaneously benefit and be a victim. And so how do you right this wrong? And so I think one of the ways that you right the wrong is through language. One of the ways that societies, the outgroups, find a way to cope, to get along, is they network together. They have their own language, their own way of speaking to each other. They preserve their arts or their culture, or they develop new arts and culture. Look at the Irish. They're a classic example. St. Patrick's Day, not such a big deal in Ireland, a big deal here, because for a while the Irish were an out group.
Well, I mean, Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is only celebrated in the United States.
Here. Right, same thing here. And so it is customary for people who are pushed to the edge of society, people who are not part of the in-group, to do things like this, to deal with the structural violence that is very real to them, but we and the in-group are kind of oblivious to. So yeah, it makes sense. The least we can do.
Where I disagree is where the cross the line to where now you said something to me, therefore I have the right to physically attack you. That is a line. I don't care what excuse you have.
Okay, now
anybody should be allowed to cross.
Right. Well, I think fighting words is a recognized exception, right?
No.
And have you ever had your feelings hurt, Scott?
Does not justify me to physically harm you.
Okay. Have you ever had your feelings hurt, though?
Of course.
Okay. So what you are acknowledging, in my understanding here, is what you're acknowledging is that words can have an emotional impact on you.
Yes.
And they do, they absolutely do.
Yes,
you're a human being. You have feelings, you have emotions, and your emotions can affect your health, and they certainly affect your mental state.
You can choose how you respond.
Can you? I mean, because part of the are you familiar with the fight or flight response in the brain?
Yes.
Okay. So when you experience fight or flight, your brain shuts down and you're basically reduced to a brain stem. And you're reduced to an animal, and you're trying to survive like any other animal. You're not using your higher reasoning and higher functioning skills. So if I put you into that state,
right? But let me respond to
my language, my words.
I know, but let me respond to that. You can train yourself while you are not in fight or flight. You can train yourself to know how to respond. You can train yourself so that your responses, that's why it's important to spend time as a Christian reading the Bible, spend time with God, or whatever, there's ways to train yourself so that when you get in that fight or flight, because that's what we do with military people. That's what we do with first responders. They get trained to a point so that when they get into that moment, their body responds to their training. You train your mind. It's possible for you to train your mind, train your emotions, train your spirit, so that when you get in that moment, you are responding properly because you took the time ahead of time to train yourself to respond properly.
And that's how we maintain slavery and segregation, isn't it?
No, that's how you maintain. No, that's how you yourself. Yeah. That's how you control your emotions. You train yourself. I train myself. I read the Bible. I train myself so that when somebody responds in that way to me, I don't have to and be scared and respond.
And why did slave owners teach the Bible to their slaves? And why did black folks for 500 years learn not to act out against their masters?
That's where you're going with this? My God.
Because it's an example of this, Scott.
No, because I can improve myself.
Yes.
I can improve myself, and I can be better, and I can be a better human being by training myself.
So here's where I think we're going to agree on this.
You're going to twist that and say that training yourself to be better is somehow oppressive?
It can be if it's used by the in-group to oppress the out-group. Yes. Yeah.
But do it yourself. Be a better person. Do it yourself. If we all did that, that's the answer. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's a principle. That's why it's a principle to follow.
Okay, but I get what you're saying, Scott.
You're saying it's not an answer simply because somebody can abuse it? Are really?
No, I'm not saying it's not an answer, Scott, but I am saying it's widely abused. It's widely abused. And the people who we are telling that they should train themselves are people who are actually the masters of it, because it was key to their survival for 5 centuries to date. This is why black folks get, why it's more difficult when they get pulled over, because there's this huge legacy of all of this.
It's how you respond. If you are expecting both the police officer is seeing that minority and is expecting that minority to be a troublemaker. And the minority is being told the police are expecting you to be a troublemaker. So when they both act like the stereotype, that's when you have a problem. Stop being the stereotype. I don't care what side you're on. Stop being the stereotype. Because then you're if the police officer comes up, bangs the door, get out, you're just feeding the problem. If a police officer says, "Hey, can you come out?" No, I don't have to. You're just feeding the problem.
Sure,
Both of
sure,
you,
sure.
be
But
better.
but
Both of you trained to
the
be better.
onus,
Don't have the problem.
the onus of
It's on both of them.
responsibility
Yes,
is on the in group
it's
more
on
than
both
the
of them.
out
Yes.
group, because the in
Can you
group
agree
has
it's on
the
both?
power, the out group does not.
Can you agree it's both of them? Are you
No.
willing to say that?
No.
Both.
It's on the in group. It's
Then,
on
then
the
you
in
will
group
never have a solution. If
until you have an equilibrium of power.
one side
It's
is
on
always
the in
told
group.
they have to change, if one side is always told they don't have to change, then that's a problem. Everybody should be changing.
Why do we expect better
the
behavior from teachers than from students?
It doesn't matter.
There's a power difference,
I
right?
was raised properly.
Better
I was
behavior from bosses than
to-
from
to
employees.
respond good to students, but respond good to teachers. I train my kids to respond good to teachers.
Absolutely.
And guess what? My kids got good
But
responses.
who
because
has the greater responsibility? That's the
who
question.
cares? Both of them should do it. Who cares who has the greater responsibility? Both of them should do it. I'm surprised you can't say that both of them should do it, because obviously both of them should do it. Yes, both of them should do it. Yes.
The
Yes.
problem with me
Both of them
conceding
should
that
do it.
point
Yes.
to you is then you're going to cry victory. And no, I don't want you to do that, because the onus is on
that
the
it's
in
right.
group.
You're refusing to say it because it's going to hurt your argument. You know it's right, but you're
It's not
refusing
going
to
to curtail my argument at all. My
say
argument is
it.
sound.
You know it's right. Both sides should do it.
The people who
Yes.
comment on this video can weigh in with their opinion.
Both sides should do it. Why can't you say that? Why can't you say both sides should do what's right?
Because I think the onus of responsibility is on the group with the power.
I would always say the onus of responsibility is on me.
Well, okay, that's easy for you to say because you're part of the group with the power.
How do you know?
Because just the
How do
very
you know?
language you are, the very argument that you're making
Circular.
indicates that you're part of the
Your
the
argument
in-group.
indicates that my proof that you're in the in group is that what you're saying is proof. It's a circular reasoning. You don't have any outside.
Scott,
You don't have any outside proof. What's your outside proof that I'm on the in crowd?
Well, you're not an ethnic minority,
I'm Hispanic.
but you're not. That's
I'm
not part of
50%
the out group anymore.
I'm 50% Hispanic.
Okay, now in the 1950s, sure,
Mhm.
but in the 2020s, no.
Okay, so my dad was full
You're not
Hispanic.
e-
My dad
yeah,
was full.
you're not even
Mexican.
a minority in
They
California
taught him-
anymore. You're a
they
majority.
taught him the right way to live. They taught him, you be respectful. I don't care who's responsible,
because he
responsible
was
for
not part
you.
of the in group,
and they were on
he
the
had
out
to
group.
learn that to survive. He had to learn that to survive.
And guess
So
what? Now my family is thriving because of that. What's wrong
Sure.
with that?
sure.
What's wrong with that? If everybody,
Right. What's wrong with that is that the
Right.
injustice existed to begin with,
Yeah, so
which
get
is contrary, by the way, to Christian charity.
What do you mean?
It is contrary to
No, no,
Christianity
Christian charity
to
is
treat
Christian
people
charity-
as less than equal.
yes.
We are all equal in the
That's
eyes of the
nothing
Lord,
to do with
are
law.
we not? So if
Nothing
we
to
are
do
to
with
see
law.
the world
You're
with the eyes
talking-
of Christ,
You're conflating things. You're conflating what Christians should do before God and what society should do as a governance. That's
right?
completely
Because
different.
society
You don't
does
apply
not do. Society does not do what I think we agree society should do.
I'm sure there's many ways that you and I can agree on that. Yeah.
We didn't get to talk about punching Nazis.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, the idea is if you say someone's a Nazi, do you have a right to punch them?
No, but if somebody says that they're a Nazi,
Do you have a right to punch them?
you have to. You have an obligation to, because fascism is an unpardonable, unacceptable political philosophy.
Marshall,
You
the
cannot
head
accept.
of the Office of Pre-Crime.
That's right. If you are a fascist,
Pre-crime.
you got to nip that in the bud. It is the one and only.
Thoughts and your
It is
beliefs
uniquely
that
violent.
you can be violently attacked. Your thoughts and your beliefs. If you don't commit,
yeah,
a
because
crime, you can't do
fascism-
anything. Your thoughts
fascism
and beliefs are
condemns
worthy of
people
being
on the basis of
worthy
their
being
birth.
violent against. Wow.
Yeah,
That's how
fascism
far-
condemns
that's-
people on the basis of their birth. That
And
is an
that's-
unacceptable
and that is the-
ideology.
And that
It
is the
should be
very
banned.
problem. That's the very problem of this argument is that anybody can call me a Nazi and feel justified in being violent against me.
No, nobody can call you a Nazi. Only you can identify yourself as a Nazi. But if you identify yourself as a Nazi, then hey, it's game on. Because you cannot tolerate fascism in any society.
Again, when we say speech justifies violence, there are people who will say that's a Nazi and they'll attack them because they believe that person's a Nazi. Because, well, you believe this, therefore you're a Nazi. Oh, you want a border wall?
No. To be a Nazi, to be a fascist requires very specific statements or beliefs. You have to hold specific ideas as true.
And I think you should criminalize when they take action on those ideas. Otherwise, it's the opposite.
I agree with you. I agree with you there.
Crime.
I agree with you there. You criminalize when they take action. Absolutely. Don't ever allow them to take action.
No, criminalize when they take action.
I agree with you.
You know, you just said don't allow them to take action. That's you can't do that. That's not justice. You can't say,
well, if you criminalize when they take action, you're not allowing them to take the action now, aren't you? You're
punishing them for the action. There's a difference.
Okay.
You're punishing them for the action. By saying you don't allow them to take the action, it means you're doing something to stop them before they take the action. Pre-crime, officer pre-crime would be messed up. Sorry, it's been 30 minutes, 31 minutes. We didn't really get to, I guess you're right. We didn't, man, that went by fast. That went by fast. I guess we didn't get, so I would say if somebody commits a crime, punish them. If someone's physically violent against you, you have a right to physically defend yourself. If someone calls you a name, you don't have a right to hit them.
Yeah, I think we have to learn about structural violence and the role of language in perpetuating structural violence because it's very real and it has real world effects on people's health and lifespan and well-being. And if we want a more just and equitable society, this is the sort of stuff we have to get into. We got to elevate our reading level from above the dictionary and get into where the researchers and the experts are and pay attention to what they have to say.
Don't leave the definition behind because you're co-opting it to give yourself power. I hate that. You know, I hate that. Guys, thank you. Guys and gals, thank you for joining us today. United Opposition, we're here every Tuesday talking like this about opposite views of what we see. Marshall, till next time.
See you later. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.